category, The Songbird and the Ballad of Snakes, or whatever. I'm back again. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be ranking every single book I have ever read in the past 2 years. Don't worry, it's not a lot. I'm a slow reader. It's only like 42. I do want to say, reading is subjective. If I liked it and you didn't, or vice versa,
to each their own.
With that said, I do have some guidelines that I kind of roughly follow. Just some things that I personally look for when I'm reading. First being plot. Plot holes and plot progression, you know. 2, world creation and world building. Is there a government? Is there politics? 3, the characters, obviously. We've got character arcs, their development. Do I have a connection with them? 4th, we've got grammar and logic and editing, self-explanatory. And 5th, probably the most important one out of all these, did I have a good time? I also have split up the books into categories from 1 star to 5 stars. Okay, let's get into it. First up on the chopping block, our 1 star category. I only have 2 books in this category out of the 2.5 years I've been reading consistently. Victim number 1, Hunting Adeline. Curiosity killed the cat with this one. This is the 2nd book in the series and somehow it's worse. I'm not one to shy away from heavy and darker material, but this was just abuse and gore, just for shock value it felt like, and for 250 pages, mind you. The cherry on top of it all, it was still cringy. I will give the author that. That takes some skill. Her writing specifically, I found it to be both bland and vulgar, blunt, but also made no sense to me whatsoever. I know that it's tailing the line of a bad book when I can think of ways I can write the book better.
I'm not an author.
Whenever I thought of Zaid, I thought of this guy from TikTok.
Could I interest you in some back shots, my lady?
Don't ask me why. I truthfully. On to the next victim, Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I have read better things for free on Archive of Our Own and Wattpad than whatever this was. The world building was not there for me. All of it was shallow. All of the characters, I didn't even have a good time. So I will just leave it at that. Moving on to our 2-star category. This is the 3rd book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. Evangeline's character, logic, and just kind of how she thinks about things is so 50-50 and hot and cold to me. It really just pulled me out of the book to the point where I was no longer immersed in this fairy tale fantasy world. Everything that happened towards the end just felt random, like none of it had any meaning. And that kind of took away from the significance and symbolism of everything else up until that point. 2-star, and that's being generous. Our next 2-star has been in the hot seat since the recent movie adaptation.
How would you recommend they go about it?
Like asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share.
It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I actually really did like Lily's character, and there were a lot of elements of this book that I enjoyed. I actually read it about 3 years ago. It put me off reading for another year. With it towing the line around domestic violence and abuse, it was also still cringy to me. The Ellen storyline didn't really resonate with me, and I did not pick up the duet that goes along with this book. Okay, things are looking up from here. We are now entering our 3-star category. At the bottom, You Are A at Making Money. This was more of like a mindset hype man book, so to speak, more than actual financial advice. There were examples of people turning their life around and starting that business they always wanted to. It kind of came off to me as more cheesy than anything. And yeah, not much else to say about that. Next, The Power of Awareness. I had to read nonfiction books for a fitness challenge I was doing about a year and a half ago. I do not normally reach for these. This was more manifestation and how your thoughts fabricate into your reality. It touched on topics of how you're more than your emotions. It was a quick and easy read. I don't know if I've applied any of this into my real life. We've got A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. I think this had a lot of good bonding moments for the characters, considering it was our Christmas special, so there's no major threat at the moment. I can only remember one quote from this. Next we have The 7-Year Slip. This is not necessarily a story I normally reach for. It's definitely a good palate cleanser. I read this after a major series, if I remember correctly. The concept was really cute, but past that, there wasn't any major impact or memorability of this one for me. Haunting Adeline. Cringy? Very much so. Might I say hot? Yes. It's really fast-paced. I just don't know if I like her writing style. It was a little bland to me, and sometimes the dialogue comes off as too wordy to be natural or authentic. In my opinion, I may just be being picky. We've got a big boy. House of Sky and Breath. This is the second book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. This just dragged on too long for me. Mr. Merman, River Guy, got way too much screen time in my opinion. Danica was a little bit of a cop-out when it came to certain plot holes and story drivers. I did really like the aspect of the Asteri and this kind of higher power. And I do have to say, the Harpy and Runes storyline, that was by far my favorite to read. Have I read the third book? No. Will I? We will see. Next, Done and Dusted. This was just a good little country romance. I connected with it pretty easily because I'm from Colorado and it takes place in a lot of familiar places between Colorado and Wyoming. How could you go wrong with a brother's best friend? I also just love country themes. You know, it also had me possibly kicking and giggling my feet a little bit. Oh my god.
Giggling and kicking my feet.
We are circling back. I'm gonna group these two together because I ranked them one after the other. Kind of what I mentioned for the third book. It was very hard for me to find why Evangeline and Jax had this love connection when Evangeline could not tell if she loved him or hated him every 5 minutes. It just seemed a little bit inauthentic. I also had more questions by the end of the second book that were not answered in the third book. There were a lot of little storylines here and there that just never got picked up again and questions that were never answered. I did really like the first book. I liked the fairy tale aspect. It definitely was unlike anything I had ever read up until that point. I don't know if it was the fact that this was a YA series. I just didn't really connect with the characters. Sounds like a me problem. But the decline was there. So, we are now entering the top 3 of our 3-star category, The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I actually really enjoyed this book. This was my first kind of vampire-esque book. I had a really good time. One thing that was a little off for me, which brought it down, was the writing style and the world building. Wasn't there for me all the time, but the characters definitely made up for it. I really liked Rain and Mish specifically. I didn't necessarily connect with Araya's character, but that's okay. I do think I will be continuing this series. I just haven't gotten around to the second and third. In our second place, Verity by Colleen Hoover. I am no proclaimed Coho fan, but the kind of mystery thriller aspects of this, almost paranormal, I would say, really drew me in. The storyline I think was really interesting, and the romance too. But the unknowns about it all, this was a hit. I'm sorry, I'm not. My number 1 in our 3-star category, Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. This is like the 6th book, I want to say, in the Throne of Glass series. Nezrin and Yrene carried this. They deserved all the screen time they got in this book. You know? No words. I also did really enjoy seeing another map and another continent of the Throne of Glass world. That was really interesting to me, learning, you know, new culture, everything like that.
Yada, 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 I'm yapping.
I did the tandem read of this along with Empire of Storms, and that made it a little more tolerable. She was good. I'll give her that. We are now entering our 4-star category. It's about to get serious. Starting us off, Phantasma. This was such a good time. I read this around Halloween and it just set the mood. It set the mood. The trials were actually high stakes, and Blackwell, are you joking? Need I say more? The one thing that took it down from being a 5-star, the ending was incredibly rushed. It was bad. That's putting it politely. I, as a reader, was genuinely confused by the end. Sit there and process. Overall, A Court of Silver Flames. This is the 5th book in the ACOTAR series. Do I understand why Nesta is the way she is? Yes. Does that make me like her? No. Okay, that was harsh. Anyways, I love Cassian. I loved Gwen and Emery, and I loved their girl bonding moments, even though they involved Nesta. I hate pregnancy tropes. That was just easy writing in my opinion. Feyre has gone through enough. Leave her be. I do like getting other people's point of views outside of our potentially unreliable narrator Feyre, but God, do I miss her point of view. Another big boy, incoming. This is the 1st book in the Crescent City series, House of Earth and Blood. I really actually enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I was going to. It definitely was a lot different than what we have gotten in the past from Miss Sarah J. Maas, which was fresh and fun. If you get through the first 100 pages of world building,
Which feels like you are reading in an entirely different language.
this book taught me patience, and that was rewarded. Also, bonus points, it did make me cry. The ordeal, Bryce, Danica, got me sappy. It was good. It was good. Quicksilver. This had every element of a romance fantasy that I adore. It had the formula. I love the alchemy aspect and the different worlds and universes, and our big brooding male who's got a soft heart. But for real, what's a romance fantasy book without a little bit of cringe? I did read the audiobook, which I think made it a little bit better. I didn't really love the vampires.
I did not care for the Godfather.
What?
Threw me off. Speaking of cringe, his name is Kingfisher. You truly cannot get more cringe than that. A Court of Wings and Ruin. The 4th book in the ACOTAR series. The plot armor was heavy in this one. 1 minute, I'm sobbing over multiple major deaths. And the next, they were unscathed. Next page. All of that emotional turmoil for what? I did like the politics kind of taking a forefront in this book. We got to see other parts of Prythian that we haven't yet explored. I love that. I really do. This was good. Another thing that was a little bit off for me, it felt like there was a lot of buildup to a war that just simply resolved. It didn't rip my heart out of my chest like I thought I was going to. So, Empire of Storms. This is the 5th or 6th book in the Throne of Glass series. Lorcan, and I'm going to say this wrong, Elodie. That's how I've been reading it. That's how I'm going to say it. I love them. They were my favorite in this book. I love their storyline. We fully see the burden that Aelin is carrying throughout this whole book, and everyone given their 2 cents to her when behind the scenes, she is the puppet master. I do miss the times when we were kind of on the same page with her finding out stuff, but it pulled at my heartstrings nonetheless, especially the ending, bringing us to our big finale book. Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Her storytelling is off the charts for me. I'm not usually one to like time jumps like we saw in the 7-Year Split. But she does it in such an intriguing manner. Her descriptor words and the way she writes her characters just make them so human, even though in this book they're not. Some of what this book reminded me of was Arcane, Jujutsu Kaisen, Saltburn, weirdly enough. And our main character heavily reminds me of Coriolanus Snow, younger version. Another hit. I will be continuing the duology. A classic, A Court of Thorns and Roses. This is what got me back into reading consistently. Even though people compare it to a modern Fae, Beauty and the Beast retelling, I truly have such a deep appreciation for this book, and the cringiness, it has sparked something deep inside of me that makes me so happy. Throne of Glass. For time simpler. I think this is a really good intro book in setting the foundation of this huge world we come to know by the end of the series. I love the mystery and the castle and the secrets and Selena or Lillian. I do love this book so much. Oh. Mockingjay. This is the third book in the Hunger Games series. The only reason I didn't rate this one 5 stars, I feel like it was such a big shift between the tributes and the victors and the games to just all-out war. In all honesty, I personally just like the 2 previous books better. It was still a masterpiece. I truly think Katniss got the ending she deserved after all that trauma. Wrong. This is number 3 of our 4 stars, Assassin's Blade. This is a series of novellas, a prequel to the story we are reading in Throne of Glass. I'm pretty neutral when it comes to novellas, but the fact that each of these stories somehow has a part to play in the bigger story at hand, it was done right. I love that. Do I even need to mention Sam? I was sobbing by the end of this book. This caused other books to be rated 5 stars, which we will get into in a second. The Dragon Republic. This is the second book in the Poppy Wars series. Where do I even begin? I think this book does a great job conveying how the power and rage that Rin has is still overshadowed by her immaturity at times and her innocence, what's left of it, and how naive she can be when it comes to the bigger world of politics. Her realizing that she can't trust anyone, even herself, is so gut-wrenching. The semi-found family in this as well, with the turmoil and betrayal, and this truly was a masterpiece. This took me a little bit longer to get through, tougher at times because I kind of know the betrayals that are coming, and that's what took it down a star for me. But other than that, R.F. Kuang does it again. Our number 1 spot in our 4-star category goes to this monster. The only reason I gave it 4 stars, it was a lot of content, a lot of POVs, trying to tie the story all back together. I think this was a masterpiece of an ending for a series this complex. I cried multiple times. There was a little bit of plot armor, but the end message was just so clear and beautiful. How an act of kindness can save the world. Okay, enough being cringe. We are now in our heavy hitters, our 5-star category. At the bottom, The Drowning Faith. This is literally 15 pages of Nezha's POV, and in those 15 pages, it brought me right back to how I was feeling reading all 3 of the Poppy War books. I don't know how she does it. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is our next 5-star. Again, the time jumps, the historical crumbs and contexts, the poetic writing. I loved it. The metaphors, the characters. Truly, this was such a lovely experience.
experience.
Nocticadia by Carrie Lake is our next up. I love this book. It was my first kind of academia-centered setting book. It was so good and well thought out. The concept of the research and the science and the characters, it was really, really well done, especially for a professor-student relationship. Scandalous. So good. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Do I even need to explain? Being inside Snow's head and seeing how much of an unreliable narrator he is to himself and to his world, and how sociopathic and narcissistic he is. It was a little bit of a tough read at times, but it was so good. For a prequel, hats off to her. And the movie was even better. Maybe. Queen of Shadows is next. This book felt like the second awakening of the series. Now that we know all about the world, all of the mysteries are starting to be uncovered. Everyone is back together, but it's also different and weird now. The dynamics are changing. This was just such a good book. Two Twisted Crowns is next up. This is the second book in the One Dark Window duology. Her writing style in this, how she ended the book, I sobbed, I cried. I did not expect myself to cry for this book, but I devoured this in the first book. The Burning God. This is the third book in the Poppy War series. This is giving Attack on Titan Season 4. Even though I would argue Rin is a little more malicious than Eren to an extent, even though she does come to her senses. The characters, the history, the turmoil, Kate, the ending, this was truly a masterpiece. Crown of Midnight. This is the second book in the Throne of Glass series, and this is where I really started to connect to the world and to the characters. Not everything is as it seems, and it's driving the story so well. Nehemia, the mystery, being on the same page as Selena for once, really drives this book home for me. One Dark Window. This is the first book of the duology. I cannot rave about this enough. The magic system was so well thought out, but yet so simple. Same with the world building. It was so well done. Not to mention the family trees actually being tied to like real trees. Our main girl, Elspeth Spindle, cute. The courting, the politics, the cards, are you joking? The Nightmare was my favorite. Catching Fire. I think this was the best second book to a series ever. I love that we get more history about the previous tributes and the victors, and just about the world in general, because there's so many unknowns still. Katniss is obviously breaking the mold. Peeta is just breaking. Incredible. Heir of Fire. This book was launched into the 5-star spot solely from Assassin's Blade. The grief and everything Aelin, I'm gonna put a spoiler warning in here, is going through just hits home so much. We also get introduced to Manon and Rowan, and we get to explore more of Throne of Glass outside of the confines of their dreary world. This is truly a wonderfully done enemies to lovers. I said what I said. We are now entering our top 3 spots for my 5-star books. This was to be expected, The Poppy War. This was an incredible first book to a series. I have never been much of a history junkie. The writing is so raw and beautiful. It doesn't cut corners around these really hard war topics, and the characters are so incredibly well written and multifaceted. If you haven't read it, this is your time. You can see my special edition right here. Number 2, The Hunger Games. This book truly, I think, set the foundation for all of these modern day fantasy dystopian books. For being a young adult series, I mean, the love for it is warranted, 100%. I don't even need to talk about it because y'all probably already know. The details and the theories and the politics and the government and truly everything is so airtight when it comes to this world. That's what I appreciate the most. Rue, she set the blueprint. She really did. Deserving of the number 2 spot. I don't know if y'all saw this one coming. Our number 1 spot. A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. The love and appreciation I have for this book, I truly cannot convey in 2 words.
You were everything.
I know it's cringy. I know there are issues with it. Does it make me love it less? No. This and the other top 2 are the only books I've actually reread. It takes a lot for me to want to reread a book. I love Rhysand and Feyre so much, especially Feyre's point of view. With that list, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you stuck around the whole way through, let me know what your guys' favorite books are, and I don't know. I have my Goodreads linked. If you guys want to go check that out, we can be friends. Mwah. Bye.